My name is Mavish Ashraf. Today's topic is ASP.NET MVC working with controllers. MVC stands for Model, View and Controller. MVC separates application into three components: Model, View and Controller. Model represents shape of the data and business logic. It maintains the data of the application. Model objects retrieve and store model state in a database. View is a user interface. View displays data using model to the user and also enables them to modify the data. Controller handles the user request. Typically, user interact with view, which in turn raises appropriate URL requests. This request will be handled by a controller. The controller renders the appropriate view with the model data as a response. Request response in MVC architecture. Shown in the figure, when the user enters a URL in the browser, it goes to the server and calls appropriate controller. Then the controller uses the appropriate view and model and creates the response and sends it back to the user. Now have a look for controller. The controller in MVC architecture handles any incoming URL requests. Controller is a class derived from the base class system.web.mvc.controller. Controller class contains public method called action method. Controller and its action method handles incoming browser requests, retrieves necessary model data and returns appropriate response. Controller class name must end with a word controller. For example, controller for home page must be home controller. Controller class must be located in controller folder of MVC folder structure. MVC will throw the resource cannot be found error when you don't append controller to the controller class name. Now, adding new controller. Right click on the controller folder, select add, click on controller. It will open add controller dialog as shown. In the add controller dialog, enter the name of the controller. Remember, controller name must be end with the controller. Let's enter home controller and click add. This will create home controller class with index method in homecontroller.cs file under controller folder as shown. As you can see, the home controller class is derived from controller class. Every controller in the MVC must derive from the abstract controller class. This base controller class contains helper methods that can be used for various purposes. We will return a dummy string from index action method of home controller. Changing the return type of index method from action result to string and returning dummy string. So let's invoke it from the browser and you will see the following page in the browser. Action method. All the public methods of a controller class are called action methods. They are like any other normal method with the following restriction. Action method must be public. It cannot be private or protected. Action method cannot be overloaded. Action method cannot be static method. Example of index action method of home controller. As you can see in the figure, index method is a public method and it's return action result using the view method. The method is defined in the controller base class which return the appropriate action result. Now you can see that view defined in a base controller class which is controller. Default action method. Every controller can have default action method as per configured root in route config class. By default, index is a default action method for any controller as per configured default root as shown. You can change the default action name as per your requirement in route config class. You can go in a app start folder and click on a route config.cs file and you can change the action name index if you change in the HomeController class any method or any action. If you want to run any action instead of index, you can change their name as per your requirement. Action result. MVC framework includes various result classes which can be returned from an action method. Their result classes represent different types of responses such as HTML, file, string, JSON, JavaScript, etc. The following table lists all the result classes available in ASP.NET MVC. View result represents HTML and markup. Empty result represent no response. Content result represent string literal. File content result, file path result, file stream result represent the content of a file. JavaScript result represent a JavaScript script. JSON result represent JSON that can be used in Ajax. Redirect result represent a redirection to a new URL. Redirect to route result represent another action of same or other controller. Partial view result returns HTML from partial view. HTTP unauthorized result returns HTTP 403 status. In action result class is a base class of all the above result classes. So it can be return type of action method which return any type of result. The view method is defined in base controller class. It also contains different method which automatically returns particularly type of result as shown in the table. Result class and base controller method. View result have a method view. Content result have a method content. File content result, file path result, file stream result have a method file. JavaScript result have a method JavaScript. JSON result have a method JSON. Redirect result have a method redirect. Redirect to route result have a method redirect to route. Partial view result have a method partial view. Date and time. If a controller action returns a result that is not in an action result, for example a date or an integer, then the result is wrapped in a content result automatically. For example, when the index action of the home controller is invoked, the date is returned as a content result automatically. The index action is return a date time object. The ASP.NET MVC framework convert the date time object to a string and wrap the date time value in a content result automatically. The browser receives the date and time as plain text. Content. The content result action result is special. You can use the content result action result to return an action result as plain text. For example, the index method return a message as plain text and not as HTML. When the When the home controller index action is invoked, a view is not returned. Instead, the raw text ASP.NET with MVC is returned to the browser. Redirect to action. If you want to redirect the user from one controller action to another, you call the redirect action method. This index action is called when it's redirect, the another action is called, which is home. Thank you. I hope it will help you a lot.